process improvement, where I first learned to what it meant to decompose what people work and understand people's requirements, moving into being the head of IT team. So truly IT person, and then moving into audit, where I leveraged all of those process and controls and IT functions. And then I moved on into right now where I'm at, I do IT risk and controls. But before that, I did some product development, release management, applications.
Good morning.
Good morning. So Stephanie, I'm going to ask you, because I apologize, we didn't get a chance to chat. Do you want the questions at the end? Do you want the questions as they come? How would you like to moderate the room for you?
I would like, if possible.
That's what's happening. I'm going to close out. Bye.
Bye. I would like if possible, the questions at the end, if it makes sense. And the reason why is towards the end of our discussion, because today is less about me presenting information and more about a discussion, which after I get through some of the Agile, there's Tom, after I get through some of the Agile concepts, my friend Tom here and a little bit of Aaron are going to join me in some conversation. So that would probably be a good time for us to really answer some questions, because we'll get more of a panel, a spirited conversation.
Wonderful. So what I'm going to ask everyone, any questions you have, we will put in the chat. Otherwise, at the end, we will open it up for more open conversation and dialogue. We are now live on YouTube, Stephanie. So by all means, when you are ready, please begin.
Okay, will do. Okay, good morning, everyone. How are you today? All right, so let's get started. So today is Monday, August 10th. And is it Monday or Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday, thank you, sorry. I've been doing a little bit of a traveling. I'm a little bit tired, so you have to forgive me for not knowing what day of the week it is. So with that, it's Tuesday, August 10th. And when I was asked to present at this chapter meeting, they said, what topic would you like to talk about? And I said, you know, I would really like to talk about Agile techniques and which ones we should use. And it's more about understanding the techniques that are out there and why we should use them, and less than some deep dives in every single one. And I'll give you the backstory behind that. As Rita was asking, like, what have I done in the past? I've always been like a hidden BA. I've done a lot of BA work and not really truly understanding the BA world of which I was in, because I wasn't, you know, formally in an IIBA chapter, but I was doing all these techniques. I learned them at work. I learned them just by practice or people that I knew as a project manager. And then, so when I started really getting involved in IIBA, one of the first things I asked was, like, can people tell me what the techniques are? Can you give me your, you know, your products, your spreadsheets or whatever, so I can really dive into them? And people would say to me, well, you know, it's a work product or this or that. And so what I really came to understand was techniques are really about understanding what they are, how to use them in the Agile mindset, and then all the collection of what you would use, these artifacts, comes a little bit later. And let's talk about why. So today's presentation, give full credit, is based on the Agile extension of the BABAC Guide 2 and a bunch of readily available information that IIBA and chapters present. And so what today I'm going to talk about are the 3 Agile planning horizons. What is a horizon? Relate the context to the techniques, and I'll give you some definitions of what that means. We'll talk about some of the techniques that work well for internal teams and some that work well for the external teams. So what do we mean by, hold on, let me see, just one second, do a better job. Just one moment while I get my slides advancing properly. Thank you. Just give me one moment, please. Here we go. There we go. Okay, just my apologies for that.
We've all been there. We understand.
It is early. I'm still exhausted from my exercise this morning. Okay, so now we can see the screen. Perfect.
There you go.
Perfect. Now we are on fire here. All right. So when we talk about the Agile horizons, there are three that's defined within the Agile extension. There's the strategy, the initiative, and the delivery. And the purpose of them is to describe the common business Agile practices performed. And there's a definite link between Agile extension, which has 24 techniques, and the BABOK 3. But one of the key things is to remember is that within each of these horizons, with the feedback and the learn and the decide, there's a tremendous amount of feedback that should be happening, because what happens in one horizon, such as the strategy, influences the initiative as well as delivery. And so depending on what that feedback is, it could result in changes throughout the life cycle of what's occurring. So let's dive into the Agile mindset. Now, the Agile mindset really doesn't prescribe what to do in the situations, and it really leaves it up to the teams to choose the techniques, your activities, and your processes, and the tools that you feel are most important. So remember when a moment ago when I talked about I wanted the tools, I wanted the techniques, like somebody give me a recipe book, but really it's dependent upon the teams in an Agile methodology and the mindset of what you're using. I mean, one of the key elements in this is, inspecting and adapting. Like, what are we doing? What are we learning? And what tools and techniques should we be using at that point? And really just applying, using that Agile mindset to maximize the outcomes and with the minimal outputs. And so really this is based on core human values, and really gives people the opportunity to flex and be able to adjust within an Agile mindset. Now, from the 3 Agile planning horizons, this is a lot of information on the screen, and so I just want to give you some of the highlights of it. Within the strategic, it takes about 3 months to multiple years. Initiative is 1 to 3 months, and delivery 1 week to 4 weeks to 6 to 8 weeks. And so really depending on the team, what you're doing different things. You're picking it, you're using that Agile mindset to be able to figure out what works best for your team. So from a strategy, the strategic horizon, this really refers to the decisions that that impact the entire team. As a BA, I'm supporting the decisions and the strategy around the allocation of resources. What work should be funded, the approaches to be taken, do we have the skills and the resources needed to do it, and really focusing on aligning with the business goals. In the initiative, this is where the solutions are. This refers to decisions that impact a particular goal, your initiative, and really what you're doing is you're supporting the decisions that are being made and trying to figure out how to create value. You're really trying to understand the needs of the stakeholders and the options that are available. Are we picking the right options? Are we doing the right things? Are we listening to the feedback from the strategic horizon and within it? And then finally, the delivery horizon, this really refers to the delivery of the solution. And so I spend a lot of time in the delivery of a solution after supporting initiative and strategic. And really the BAs are working with the delivery team to understand how best to break down the work, how to deliver and test the value. Is the value being created? And really it's how to learn quickly and how to absorb that feedback. So no matter what horizon you're in, it takes different time frames, and really it's based on the differences between the organization and also the projects that you're working on. So in agility at each horizon, to kind of recap that, we want to have the same Agile mindset. We want to use the same Agile principles, and we want to continue with that continuous feedback. And the delivery, as we're doing that, it can be either iterative or adaptive. And what do I mean by that? Iterative means the planning prioritizes and refines the work in short cycles and focuses on increased feedback and learning. And adaptive evolves in continuous change to long-term plans. It's constant planning and analysis. So when you look at the horizons from this perspective, and you see a lot of information here, and you're saying, okay, from the strategy, what decisions are we making? Is it right? Is it the need worth satisfying? We get help from other teams. Once again, that feedback, that collaboration, as it feeds into the initiative. We're looking at the features and the solution, and we're continuing to talk to people until we get into the delivery. And so it's that continuous feedback loop. And so feedback, and I keep bringing it up, and there's a reason for it, and you'll see that shortly, is really to help organizations understand if they're delivering the value that the customers want. We spend a lot of time listening, we spend a lot of time updating documents, we spend a lot of time talking and all of that, but really the key is, are we delivering the value that the customer wants? Are we prioritizing the work based on what is most important, what delivers the most value, and trying to get rid of and eliminate the things that do not? And so in order to do that type of work, we use these Agile business techniques. So let's talk about the methodology. So there is no single Agile approach. So with all of the variety of techniques and processes and tools, we can do what we need to do to get the job done. And as a team, we determine what the team's methodology is. And so really, when you look at Agile and the mindset, it's agnostic to approach, right? It's based on what we can do, what techniques, what the team is doing. So from a techniques in the Agile extension in 7.0, one of my favorite sections, it says it can be challenging to select the right technique for the situation to get the desired outcome. And in 7.0.1, on the IABA website, it talks all about the right techniques, and we're going to get into that next. But for me, I always found it challenging to understand until I really started diving into these techniques, because I was thinking that there would be a cookie cutter recipe, and in Agile there is not. So let's talk about what some of these common Agile extension techniques are, and get rid of that misconception that perhaps we can just pick a few and be done, because all of them are at our fingertips. So here's 24 common Agile extension techniques found in the Agile extension from IABA. When you look at the BABAC, there's 50, so we have an assortment of them. And they span from all of the different horizons. Each of these are used in a various amount of ways and over across the horizon. And today, if you can see the bold, we're going to focus on our discussion, our team discussion, on backlog refinement, Kano analysis, and real options. So what is a technique? I've talked about it, I've used the word for the last couple minutes, but based on IABA, a technique is a manner, a method, or a style for conducting a business analysis task, for shaping its output. And in relation to that is the context, it's the circumstances for which we're using it, what we're influenced by, how we provide understanding for the changes. So many techniques can be used successfully in a variety of the contexts. When selecting the appropriate technique, we just need to use our domain knowledge. We need to use our competencies. We need to use our creativity, and we need to leverage the people, our team that we're working with, to help us understand what we can do to get to that goal, our shared goal. And also to keep in mind that we have a lot of stakeholders, internal and external, that we're really trying to meet their needs. So context. The context identifies which, when each technique is most useful. Say, for instance, communications. Communications talks about facilitating a shared understanding. The process analysis is understanding the processes. Product management is about the solution. Requirements is about understanding the requirements and facilitating the requirements lifecycle and understanding your customer. So how do all of these work together? How do you take the techniques and the context and pull them together to say, what do I use and when, and how best will it meet the goals? So there is, within the 7.0 techniques, it talks about selecting the right technique within the context, and if it works well with internal teams, and if it works well with external teams, and mostly what horizon that you would use them at. So you have some guidance here. For instance, a backlog refinement. You would be doing a backlog refinement throughout. You'd be using it strategy, initiative, and delivery, just depending on what's going on. For the Kano analysis, this works well with external team members, and this typically during the initiative. Retta last meeting talked about story mapping and user stories, which is part of requirements management under that context. So you can see how it starts to build out your techniques on when you can use them and how you can use them in this multi-layered approach. And let me see. So for communications, what we know, right, is it's facilitates shared understanding, collaboration. Process analysis is understanding the processes to identify ways to improve the product management or the refinement. Requirements management is techniques specifically helpful in facilitating in improving the requirements life cycle. Customer is identifying, understanding, and clarifying who the customer is, what they need, and the value. So hopefully that all makes sense as we start to pull all of these together in these rich techniques that we have that we can use within context across the horizons. All right, so now it's time to start talking with our friends. So when I was asked to do this presentation, I thought, what can I possibly share with people that would really give them an understanding of the techniques? And so when going through the materials, I really realized that I leverage my friends, my team, the people that I interact with. What I did is I reached out and I said, hey, tell me about some of your favorite techniques. Maybe we can share them and, you know, have a really good conversation during the presentation. And so my friend Tom, he was kind enough to let me leverage him to talk about Kano analysis. And this is the stock and standard answer when you go to the Agile extension and other materials. It talks about, you know, what is it? It talks about product characteristics, what the process you use to identify features, what the customers want, you know, identifying what would make a solution, you know, good, bad, or better, or worse, and, you know, like from excitement, performance, and threshold. So with that, I'm going to introduce Tom. And let's see, just give me 1 second. I need.
You got me.
I got you, Tom. All right, perfect. So, Tom, did you want to talk about yourself just a little bit?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. This slide is actually a little bit out of date. Although it focuses a bit on Agile, I also, over the course of the last couple of years, have cobbled together the IIBA CBDA, the CCA certification, and waiting for the results on the CPOA. It also has me living in Brooklyn, New York, and about 6 weeks ago, I moved to my, quote, final resting place in Delaware, Ohio. Yeah.
That's
so
wonderful.
I'm sitting on my sun porch in Delaware, Ohio, kind of looking out at all the plants and the nice things that surround me. Primarily now, I'm in the teaching end of the world. You know, I did spend a bunch of time as a BA and actually as a developer, starting in the web development, the HTML days of web development. But now I've kind of migrated over as I've gone forward to the idea of, you know what, my career is time limited. I'm kind of looking to relax. And one of the things that I decided that I would really like to do is to transfer some of my knowledge and my wisdom to other BAs who have a long and hopefully rewarding career in front of them. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years, and I really rather enjoy it. I always have enjoyed helping people, and I love to talk about business analysis. I love to. I'm a techie at heart, and I just I'm very tweaked by technology, and so my wife says to me when I'm teaching, she says, I can hear your passion in your voice. I can hear you just going, you know, getting together and wanting to engage your students and enjoying the whole idea of BA and technology. So that's a bit about me.
Well, I can expand upon that. First off, I didn't know that you had 20 plus years as a professional singer in opera. We've taken a couple different classes together, and I've always enjoyed having you as a teammate, which is why I thought would be a perfect opportunity for us to really talk about some things like we normally would talk about, right? I mean, we've had the books, we've had the training, Aaron's delivered some excellent training, but a lot of times what we're talking about during the chats or at other times is, above and beyond, or we're talking about, like what we know or what we don't know, right? In that safe environment. So when I came to you and I said, hey, I'm going to present, my first time presenting to IIBA, so we'll see how this is going to go. And I said, I'd like to drag you in and have you help me talk about what this means, what a Kano model is. And so we started talking about, like, what is it? And I said, Tom, teach me, tell me. I mean, I looked at the book, I have done these, but I never really thought about it in this context. Teach me about what this means. And you said to me, how do we create one? And what did you say?
It was, we're looking at, from a practical standpoint, Kano is really relatively simple. It's defining a feature, looking at that feature, and basically soliciting feedback from your stakeholders as to how do they perceive that feature. And the really simple thing about it, which is the real joy of doing the Kano model, is that it's based on answering two questions about the specific feature as it relates to your stakeholder. The first question is, how do you feel about the product if it contains this feature? And the second question is, how would you feel about this product if it did not contain this feature? So it's really a simplistic kind of thing, and we'll see, as we see on the slide, that the answers are standard too. Right. It's basically a Likert scale, if you're familiar with them. I think everybody has experienced them, where you're given a set of answers to choose from. And in this particular case, both questions are answered with the same set of answers.
Right.
So,
right. Go ahead.
Yep. So, and again, the answers are relatively simple. I like it. I'd be willing to pay extra for it if it had it. I expect it, but I won't pay for it. I don't care about it. It's not worth paying for. I can live without it. I don't really want it. Ergo, I certainly wouldn't spend any money on it. And I don't like it. If you include it, I probably wouldn't buy it. And you asked the question from the two different perspectives. How do I feel if the product includes this feature, or how do I feel if the product does not include this feature?
Right. And when this technique, they have it as an external, typically as an external technique, right? I mean, the internal team would use it, but it's also a great technique to use with external stakeholders, external people. And when you look at the questions, it kind of makes sense, right? Because you're not getting, so a BA defined, you're saying, like, hey, what would you pay extra for? What would you not pay for? What's not worth paying for? What additional thing would you like or not like? Would you buy it or not? So they're real conversations with people that can articulate from their perspective on what it means to them, what they're looking at, what they're thinking about. And then we're taking this and articulating it back into, how the answers in a meaningful way. So it's a really good tool to where you're not expecting them to have, BA skills, but you can engage them in a very spirited and robust conversation about what is important to them. What is the value? What does the value mean to them? And then so, you put together like, what do we do with the answers, right? And then from a Kano perspective, the legend is a little bit different, which we'll get to shortly, but really it's about positive, functional, and negative, and dysfunctional. You want to talk a little bit about this?
Yep. This is, and it's one of the things that's a little bit, I want to say deceiving about doing a Kano model, because each feature you have to build this matrix for each feature. So if you have a lot of features that you're considering, you've got a bit of work in front of you, because you have to get people to answer these questions and you have to plot out all of the answers. But once you do it, it lends itself pretty readily to how do I determine which features I really want to implement and why. So what you do, again, if you flip back for a minute.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
you've got those 5 answers going in basically in a horizontal and a vertical matrix, and you're plotting each answer. How did this person respond to the question about liking the feature, and how did this person respond to the to not liking the feature? And then so you'll have an X somewhere in here, and then you just layer all of those X's one on top of the other, and you count up the results.
Okay, let's count up the results in the example. So we're going to say, what do we do with the answers, and what does it mean? So we having some good conversations with the stakeholders. They gave us a lot of information. We went back and crunched a bunch of numbers and information and did clarification and all of that. And then we have our features.
Yep. And then we look at these, and these will map into actually the matrix diagram that we'll see. But if you take the feature, and if they liked it, and they were willing to pay for it, willing to pay extra for it, then it would land in the attractive column. If it was something that people would expect, but not necessarily be willing to pay for, it would land in the must be column, and this would actually bleed down into that the product would not be useful to people without having this particular feature. And then what they call the 1D is really designed to say the better we do this, the more people are going to like it. And we'll see that in the next diagram. And the neutral column is, we don't really care if this product has this, so what? If it doesn't have it, so what? And then the reverse is, again, if this product has this, I don't really want it. I'm not going to pay for it. I'm probably not going to buy it. So once you layer all of those individual responses to that feature, you get to see how many X's landed in which boxes. And as you can see, what I've done is I've highlighted the box that is the most prevalent answer for each feature. And then over on the right hand side, you'll see the overall feature ratings. The questionable ones are because if you run back quickly to the other matrix, the previous slide, you see the black boxes. The black boxes are where someone answered both questions with the same answer. So they said, how do you feel about this feature? I like it. And how do you feel about the product if it doesn't have this feature? And they also said they like it, which is really probably I want to say a nonsensical answer. So you can see those 4 boxes that are carved out because they really don't make sense to say that the product is good if it has the feature, and this for the same feature that the product is good if it doesn't have the feature. So that's why those boxes are carved out, and those answers are the ones that are listed on the next slide as questionable. That there were a couple of people that answered the question the same way. So, but ultimately, what we get in the right-hand column is how we're going to rate the specific feature, and that's where we get into the actual looking at the overall Kano matrix, which I'm guessing is probably the next slide. Yeah, there we go. All right.
And then before we get into this, I do want to point out in time, the work that we just did was really a point in time, right? So we talked about cars, right? Because everybody can relate to a vehicle. We talked about old school vehicles and, having seat belts and power steering and brakes, which, you come to expect it nowadays with all of the new technology. You're not even really expecting, steering to be much of all at all, if anything. And so these ratings are subjective over time, right? What was once important back then, having a seatbelt, having power steering and all of that can change over time. So that's also something to keep in mind as well. Yep. So with that.
That's absolutely. And that's one of the things that kind of it sort of complicates the Kano model, but it adds value to it. So in terms of what we came up with for the answers, we've got basically three different curves that we're following, and this is plotted on a really kind of cute graph where you have customer satisfaction on the vertical axis, either from very low to very high, and then you have the execution effort going along the horizontal axis. How much work do we have to put in to make this product? Okay. And what we see on the bottom is these are the basic features for a product. And the interesting thing about this is you'll see that the green arrow really flattens out. It never gets above the 0 point. Because these are basic features that no matter how well you do them, no matter how many of you have, you're never going to drive customer satisfaction on those features. They are just things that have to be in the product, independent of how much effort you have to put to get them there. They simply have to be there if the product is going to be viable.
Right. Right. And we talked about too, it's about, you know, like when you're doing this and you're doing the assessment and you're talking about the features that you would be, you know, pushing forward in solution, you know, basic is great. I mean, that's the minimal expected. We won't get into minimal viable product conversation that we could go on for a long time on that. Yep. But you know, you want to put some wows in, right? I mean, nothing's worse than rolling out something that a lot of people have spent time on and you're trying to drive value, but yet it's kind of want. There's not a lot there. So in this, it's also important too to think about what it would take to drive even just a marginal amount of value to get above that line.
Yep. And there's two things above that line. The red curve, the excitement curve, is those wow features. It's the things that you can put into your product that people are not expecting to see. So in, you know, our car model many years ago, power brakes were something that were just this newfangled invention, or seatbelts were a newfangled invention. And the first people that put them into their products, people that saw them were like, wow, what's this? Hey, this is really cool. You know, I get I get a car that I don't have to stamp my foot through the floorboard to get it to stop, or I get a car with power steering that I can actually park in a parking space without driving myself crazy and going to the gym for a week in order to be able to do it. Those are those wow factors. And you know, we also talked when we were chatting about this yesterday about things like cell phones, where a lot of the functionality that you have on a cell phone, when it first was introduced, people were like, wow, that's really cool. The time factor that Stephanie mentioned is that over the course of time, those things become expected. So now everybody expects that there's high definition cameras on their cell phones. In fact, people rate them and say, well, you know, this camera's not as, or this phone is not as good as the other phone because the camera on this phone is so much better or so much worse than the other one. Right. Those are those wow factors. And one of the things that I mentioned to Stephanie yesterday is that, you know, you can use Kano on internal products as well as you can on external products. You know, a lot of the development work that my team and I did was for internal customers. We were not external customer facing, but we still, when we were designing applications, when we were designing web pages, when we were designing all of that, always had to be aware that we had stakeholders and that those stakeholders were going to respond the same way an external customer would to a product. So you want to look to say, you know, I want to be mindful that my customers, my users, whoever they are going to be tweaked by that. Hey, wow, this is something that's really cool. Right. And you want to expend a certain amount of effort to do that every time you're introducing a product so that you keep people interested in it.
Right. So to do that, you know, how do we build a product and what does it mean? And you know, the traditional kind of legend talked about excitement, performance, and threshold, but you're not limited to that. I mean, it's got to be meaningful to what you and your team are doing, what your stakeholders want to do, but the same concepts apply. And so as we're building it out, these relate back to a couple of your slides back ago, where it's must be the one dimensional, and And it really talks about like what the implementation and the effort is about that. So what are your thoughts?
And this is actually, this maps directly into the model. The must-be's are the basic. Those are the things those are the thresholds. It has to have those thresholds. And in terms of the effort to provide it, you really have to put in as much effort as you need in order to satisfy those quote requirements. One-dimensional are the performance things. So they're like, the better we do this, the more satisfaction we're going to derive from our customers. The classic one that Steph and I were talking about is on a car, gas mileage on a car.
Right.
It's it's something that's there, and we know empirically that people look for better gas mileage. It's one of the things that they pay attention to. And so the more we can increase our gas mileage, the better satisfaction we're going to get from our customers. And so that's that linear relationship of effort to satisfaction is what's classified as one-dimensional. And then attractive are the wow factors. Those are the excitement factors. And you, as I mentioned before, you always want to try and include one or two of those in any time you're going to be putting something out to your customers. But at the same time, you have to balance the effort. You don't want to expend too much effort to get, because those factors are not the bread and butter of the product. They're really the maintaining the interest level and the excitement about the product. So you don't want to expend necessarily too much effort on those. And then the neutral ones were the horizontal line, that nobody cares about this. It's, if it's there, it's good. If it's not there, it's good. So you want to be looking at those kinds of features and saying, do we really need this feature, and balancing it against how much effort do we have to put forth in order to produce this feature. And so as you find your effort going up, you say, you know what, maybe we should just forget about this. It's really not going to do anything for us. And then the reverse, obviously, are the things that your customer base, your stakeholders are saying, nope, we don't want to see this. We don't care whether it doesn't take you any effort or whether it takes you a lot of effort. If you put it in here, we're going to be annoyed. And
Right.
so you want to reduce those.
Whoops. Yeah. And when you think about it too, it's like we have the horizons, right? The strategy, initiative, and delivery, and there's certain times of which you try to keep it in there. So if you try to cram everything into a solution delivery, you're never going to get within the bands, whether you're predictive or not, on how you're doing the work. And so all of this, we're talking about cars and what's important and features and how to rate features and how to decipher through it. And it's like, how does it really apply to business analysis? And we talk about the product and the artifact, right? Like the business requirements documents, like what are the requirements? And then, you listed some features here about, some other items.
Yeah, and this is you can use the same sort of analysis for your business requirements document. You say, what are the elements that I could include in a business requirements document, and how are my stakeholders going to respond to those elements? And I think about this from my background. Running a business analysis team and working with a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of different circumstances. And it was like, is it worth it for us to put this into the business requirements document? Are the people who are going to be using this going to pay attention to it? Do they want it? Do they think that it's exciting? Do they think that it's necessary? Are they just totally neutral about it? So you can use the same kind of analysis to put together your actual business analysis artifacts. If your stakeholders are not going to pay attention to it, then don't spend the time on it. It ain't worth it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if there's no value, to creating things, and that's the beauty of the Agile mindset, right? What would drive value, what brings value to the stakeholders and the internal team, and what techniques can you apply to it? I'm going to go back a couple different slides. Just give me a second, everybody. So we just talked about the counter analysis and brought in a bunch of other techniques and other things that work in complementary fashion with it. And that's just one technique that you can use to understand what drives the value, what people are looking for, what solution should you deliver. And so, so with that, I'd like to ask Retta if there's any questions out there that people would like to ask about this particular technique, and if there's any thoughts or anything that people would like to share.
At this point in time, there's no questions in the
Hey,
chat.
Stephanie. Oh, I have one.
Oh, great.
Oh,
Hello.
I'm sorry. I realized John Dix here, Ferrisburg, Virginia. I realized I didn't stick up my hand, so I apologize. But can you go back one slide to that cool kind of three arrows? Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Sure. Let me get back there. That one?
Yeah, there you go. I feel like the modern day perfect example of a product here is probably the modern cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine working for Samsung or Apple and releasing a new thing that causes excitement, and then 1 year later or 2 years later, at max, it's basic, right? I mean, imagine when they first stuck a camera on a cell phone, right? That was probably even above the excitement curve, and now, boy, if it doesn't have a camera in it, now it's all about resolution and et cetera, et cetera. I feel like I think what you're trying to say there is that there's almost a gravity effect, and the cell phone is probably the perfect example, that's going to pull features from red to blue to green, right? And
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely. That's one of the joys of this model, is that it's a living kind of thing. You're going to continue to assess your product, and you need to realize that what was a wow factor in the first release is a necessary factor by the time you get to the third or fourth release. Yeah, absolutely.
And so really it's like that feedback and the continuous work on it for this type of product is super important. It's understanding those techniques that you can leverage to continue to have that good pulse on what the consumer wants, what you can deliver, and all of that. I mean, I think back to the bag phone from a million years ago, not that it was a million, to the flip phone, to where we're at right now with not just one camera, but with multiple cameras. And so the amount of work that people need to do to just understand, to keep it at a minimum, you would think, the performance, let alone the excitement, because there's a strong competition out there for people to do that. So this is an excellent tool that Tom and I talked about, and was excited to share with everyone on. It seems like it's just a couple, a simple graph, but the work behind it and the information you can get out of it is tremendous, and really does feed into that, what the product should be, what the solution should be.
And I would just challenge everybody that's out there to think about this in terms of the things that are a part of your daily life. The cell phone, we mentioned the cell phone, we mentioned the car, but I was thinking about it, in terms of things like refrigerators and stoves and microwave ovens and all of those kinds of things, stereo systems, all of it. If you look at it from this perspective, you can say, gee, when I bought this was a really cool feature, but now, not so much. If I was going to buy another one of these right now, I would expect it to have all of these features in it, because they all do. And so, you have this Kano model of thinking of things from a perspective of what does the product need, what am I willing to pay for, and what is really going to jazz me about this product.
Right. Thank you, John, for that. That was really good feedback. And and even you look at over time, even the graphic, right? I mean, how many people are wearing bow ties today? Maybe some, maybe not. So,
yep.
Anyway, so any more questions regarding this?
Yeah, so I just have a quick question. I'll keep this short. Thanks, Tom, for explaining the Kano model. So just looking at it in terms of constraints. So you've got time, we've got multiple stakeholders, and we've got multiple features. And I was just looking at that whole matrix that you had shared, and I was looking at, in terms of all those three constraints, the practicality of that in general.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bit of work that goes into this. I think the underlying wisdom is that really, once you conceptually understand those 2 questions and 5 answers, it becomes a number crunching game. It's not like, it really is not like this requires a tremendous amount of thought from your stakeholders. If you put those constraints of you have 2 questions to answer and you have 5 possible answers, you can aggregate a lot of information, a lot of numbers relatively quickly. And then once you aggregate the numbers, it falls out.
Right. And if it falls out and it's really important, they'll go back and reevaluate why they didn't rank it a little bit differently. And, when we do a lot of, in a concept from RFPs or whatever, that people get in some very complicated scoring models, right? And it seems like the more complicated you get, here where, Tom's talking about 2 questions and 5 answers, you really can get to the meat of it and really get to of what solution and features that you're looking for without overcomplicating it. And depending on what you're working on, it could be a lot of work, but the benefit of it is tremendous, right? Because you're going to be delivering value that people will want and desire, and hopefully be pretty excited about it. So.
And you could also take this and say, you know what, I may have a feature list that has 25 features in it, but there really are only 3 or 4 that I want to know whether they're critical to my product, whether they have a wow factor, or whether they're worth putting more effort into. The other 22, you can say, I know that this is necessary. I know that nobody's expecting this. So you don't really have to do the full analysis on the full feature set. You can target it and say, here's some things that we're considering doing, particularly if you have features that are going to take a lot of effort to do. Then you would want to do this. You would want to know, if I'm going to put a lot of effort into this, am I going to get some bang for my buck, or am I going to get to a minimum viable product, or do I have a wow factor?
Right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tiffany. Thanks, Tom.
Yep.
Thank you for that question. Okay, Tom, that was excellent. And now I remember, or continue to remember, why I enjoy our conversations and our study time together and all of that. You always come with such great insights and great understanding. And we certainly appreciate your time today. And hopefully we can get you to come back and talk about MVP, because that is a hot topic that always has a lot of questions and all of that. Get you to come back and do that. So
hey, I'm a BA nerd. I'll come and talk to anybody about anything.
Awesome. We appreciate that. Much appreciation. So thank you, Tom. So
my pleasure.
Thank you. That was great information. So we still have about 10 plus minutes left. And so for most of you, you probably know Aaron. And Aaron, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. There's Aaron. Okay, so Aaron, for those that do not know who you are, can you give us, a little understanding of who you are? And I can just say that before you say that you are a great contribution to this chapter. So whatever you say will not do justice to what you, all the effort. So, but let's see what you have to tell us.
Well, I've been a practicing BA for about 18 to 20 years, and that's so currently work for an insurance carrier in the United States, and I was myself and Kathy Lee, who is our current president, are the remaining founding members of the board of directors for the Bluegrass chapter. And so I've served at the regional level for IIBA, in the past and that, and, just enjoying my work as helping others, improve their business analysis practices.
Well, you do a fine job, plus an instructor for a number of the Bluegrass study courses. So greatly appreciate that, because one of them is how Tom and I, the latest one, which was the product ownership analysis. So that was a good class. So we'll have to bring up some of those at a later one. So I had asked you because, like I said earlier, when I was thinking about techniques and the ones that I love, and I thought I'll reach out to my friends and have them tell me what they like, because so that way we can talk about it. And you came back with a whole list, and I was like, you really like technique. So today's session is spot on for you. But I pulled out a couple because, you know, the one that Tom and I was talking about was when you look in the context of it, it talked about it being for stakeholders, external or internal stakeholders, but it really was less about like the team, right? Like the internal team working together in the techniques in the context of which they use. So I pulled out real options and backlog refinement. And so the first one I wanted to talk about was real options. So I took liberties and I cut and paste what you told me in here. So if, don't get mad. And so, whoops. So let's go to the official term for real options. And like I said, this comes from the Agile study materials. And it says it's used to determine when to make a decision, right? And it addresses aversion to uncertainty. A lot of times people have these features, you know, as we were just talking about with Tom, like people come up with these feature sets, but people have to ultimately make a decision on when they would solution them, right? And so real options helps the stakeholders delay the decision and focus on just the highest priority. So they're not making decisions ahead of time. And so it really reduces hasty decisions or regretful decisions, perhaps. So you want to talk to me about your thoughts about real options?
Certainly. So the one thing that I really was a real learning experience for me when I went through and learned the Agile extension and was studying to get my Agile analysis certification was that real options makes you think differently than from your standard BA. You know, when you're in the waterfall world, and this was at a time I was transitioning from waterfall to Agile. You know, in the waterfall world, you build the plan up front, and then you know you go into construction, and the developers start developing off of that plan, and the plan is pretty rigid. So you're always staying ahead of your stakeholders and your developers, and that you get things, you know, done up front. You know, and you try to stay ahead of everybody. In real options, it really teaches you to delay decisions to the last possible moment. It makes a decision into a series of options. You know, you know, in order to accomplish this goal, you can do option A, option B, or option C, and and every option has an expiration point. You know, that last possible moment where you can no longer, you know, do that particular option. And the example they give in the Agile extension is when somebody hands you their business card, your last possible moment to contact that person is when they change their contact information, their phone, their email. You know, you can no longer contact them. You know, of that. So that's the one example that they give, and you know, it really makes you think very differently, and to delay things. Don't stay ahead of your stakeholders so much. And what that does is avoid waste and reduces rework. And in particular, when I was learning this, I was working on a project where we were building a dashboard for a stakeholder group within our organization. And I wanted to get in there and build the requirements for this one particular page we were going to add to the stakeholder or to the dashboard. And the product owner was saying, we got other things to do. The development team, you know, they were working on something else, and I wanted to be ahead of everybody. And you know, I you know, after learning this, then I started backing off. And you know, I wasn't pushing so much to create that page and the requirements for that page and that. And eventually, as we went through the next, you know, few months and that, the whole design of that page, we actually went to a page that already existed. It wasn't as functional, wasn't as pretty, but it got the job done. You know, it was a page that already existed. We didn't have to build our own page, and that so a lot less work for the developers. Was delivered a lot faster than if we went and built our own page. And if I had just kept bull rushing ahead, that's what we would have done instead of backing off to wait to the last possible moment that, the development team was going to start getting to that, page in that, as well as our product owner. And, the decision came up that, we'll just, display this existing page and, and it'll work. And
Right.
things. So, it saved the company a lot of rework, a lot of time, and, it doesn't have to maintain another page now.
Right. And also too, I mean, you think about the value of it. I mean, in order to elicit the information to develop the page, you're not just using your time, you're using other people's time. That takes away from another higher value product. And so that's the beauty of being able to do this in an agile method, right? You're able to say, okay, I have the luxury, I have the ability to wait a little bit longer to do this. I have the privilege of it. And in waiting to come back, because there is a lot of time. We have something similar at work where somebody wrote requirements. I did a bunch of solutions and coming back because now they're getting ready to do it. And people have changed their mind. The culture's changed, the direction of the product roadmap has changed. And so it's like being able to have that honor of being able to put that aside and say, you know what, we've got it. We haven't lost it. It's there, but we'll come back when the time is right and when it makes the most sense. Which then, when you think about that, gets into the backlog refinement, right? Because in the backlog, what are we doing? We're doing user stories. We're understanding all these things and keeping pace with the direction of that. So.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, I mean, your love for backlog refinement.
So, the backlog user story or product backlog items, PIs, no matter how you write those, the most common method of writing those is user stories. There's all job stories and use cases and things that you could have as product backlog items. But we'll stay with user stories and that you write the user stories, but then, which one are you going to deliver first?
Right.
Which will deliver the highest value? That gets into prioritizing.
Mm-hmm.
But also you have to define them so that the developers and the testers know what to deliver and how to test it and that kind of thing. So you got to clarify, not just acceptance criteria. You can't just stop with that. They call it statement of value, which is what you consider that
right.
one statement of the user story. That's not enough to tell developers what to do or how to deliver this or what's really expected out of this feature. So you add acceptance criteria, and that defines a little bit more. But sometimes those even need a little more clarification. You could add models onto it. If you're talking about a UI, I always use prototypes. There's nothing that brings an abstract idea to a more concrete vision than a prototype. And that, so it could be any other kind of context model or anything that you could add to a user story that really helps create that shared understanding among the whole team of what the expected outcome of that user story is going to be. But when you get into backlog refinement, that is really creating that shared understanding.
Mm-hmm.
That's all about, so that everybody understands it from the same perspective, knows exactly what the expected outcome is going to be. The developers know, what to develop. The testers know what and how to test, and all of that. So, along with user stories or product backlog items and product backlog refinement, those are the cornerstones of Agile approach. So you're doing it throughout your effort in that every sprint. It doesn't say you do one backlog refinement at the beginning of every sprint. You can do it throughout.
Right.
And so and that there's no time set that you have to do backlog refinement. That is really just getting the backlog in a position, well manicured, well refined, everything clarified and elaborated. So when you get to the planning session at the beginning of your sprint, you don't have to get through and start discussing every little user story and make them understand what they are and everything, because that'll take a lot of time in your planning session. So you just start picking things off of the product backlog, put them in your sprint backlog, and these are the next ones we're going to work on.
Perfect. Perfect. So thank you for that, Aaron. And then Brett, I don't know if we have any questions, and I can wrap it up pretty quickly.
No, that is the end. I was just going to say we're at time. So, but
Okay.
there was no more questions.
Okay, great. So thank you, Aaron, so much. That was super helpful, and just to bring and tie everything together, and how Agile is really a symbiotic experience. And, you know, when we talk about which Agile technique should I use, my recommendation is talk to your community and your friends and listen to them, and have them help you understand what works, what doesn't work, and what you can leverage best for the situation that you're in. So thank you so much for that, Aaron. And Retta, there's no questions? Nope. Okay, great. So I don't know if you wanted to close out with the next couple items, so I splashed them up for you.
So thank you very much. I do appreciate that. We are working on getting next month's presentation for this time slot. I know that you guys are really liking that 7 p.m. time frame for the Taipei time. So we're working on getting that filled out. As soon as we have that slotted, we will let you guys know and get that in an email out to the group. But keep aware, we do have a wonderful presentation also on Friday about Agile certification for those of you who are interested. April, who was in the Philippines recently, is now moving to Europe, but she'll be the one presenting the topic of Agile certification. But yeah, take a look. If you have any questions, let us know. Please fill out the survey at the end. We'd love to know what topics you're interested in. And if you're interested in speaking, let me know, because we are looking for presenters for this time slot. Thank you all for joining, and you have yourself a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Appreciate it. And thank you, Tom and Aaron, for being my special guest. I appreciate your time and efforts.